The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps just declared war on the cloud. Not metaphorically, not as a rhetorical escalation in the information war they have been losing for 10 consecutive nights, operationally, with ballistic missiles and drones targeted at what the IRGC publicly claimed was Amazon's primary data center infrastructure in Bahrain. The organization that has spent decades building the most sophisticated ballistic missile program in the Middle East outside of Israel, that has threatened to close the world's most critical oil transit waterway, that has killed American service members and launched hundreds of missiles at Gulf state military positions, decided that its most strategically significant escalation in the current operational cycle was to fire at the cloud computing infrastructure of an American technology company. Neither the United States military, nor Bahrain, nor Amazon has confirmed the claim. What has been confirmed is that the IRGC targeted it, that their whole operational objective included striking commercial technology infrastructure alongside military radar sites, and that CENTCOM's response to the IRGC's announcement that it had declared war on Amazon was to release F-35 and F-16 precision strike footage over Iranian airspace, because the most effective rebuttal to an adversary claiming to have struck your data center is footage of the 10th consecutive night of American air power systematically destroying that adversary's command centers, maritime capabilities, missile sites, drone storage facilities, and air defense systems all across Iran. 10 nights, 10 consecutive nights, on time, on target, every single night. While the IRGC has been firing missiles at Gulf partners and claiming to have struck everything from radar sites to cloud computing infrastructure, CENTCOM has been doing something far more operationally significant. It has been crushing Iran's ballistic missiles and drone inventory inside deep mountain bunkers where the IRGC has been trying to conceal them, tracking Iranian launches in real time, and systematically dismantling the military architecture that makes every IRGC threat operationally meaningful. 900 vessels have transited the Strait of Hormuz, facilitated by CENTCOM, since early May. Approximately 450 million barrels of crude oil have moved through a waterway that the IRGC declared closed. The strait is open. The cloud is presumably still running, and Iran is begging Qatar, Egypt, and Pakistan to submit a ceasefire proposal on its behalf, while publicly claiming its radar clearing operation is a sign of military strength. This is what institutional desperation looks like when it is still trying to wear the mask of institutional confidence. And the next 72 hours are the most consequential decision point this conflict has produced. But let's back all the way up, because the sequencing of what happened in the most recent operational cycle tells a story that is more revealing than any single headline from it. And you need to understand the full order of events to appreciate why the IRGC's current posture is simultaneously more aggressive in its public communications and more desperate in its back-channel diplomacy than at any previous point in this confrontation. The 10th consecutive night of American strikes opened at 4:00 p.m. Eastern Time on July the 20th, 2026. F-35s and F-16s executing precision strike packages over Iranian airspace, warships engaging from the Arabian Sea, precision munitions hitting Iranian command centers, maritime capabilities, missile and drone sites, and air defense systems distributed across the country. The strikes concluded at 9:00 p.m. Eastern Time. And while CENTCOM's aircraft were still aggressing Iranian airspace, the IRGC was already preparing its press releases. They launched missiles and drones at Gulf targets during the same operational window, and then announced what they claimed to have accomplished with those launches. Radar sites struck, military positions hit, and the Amazon data center in Bahrain destroyed. The Amazon claim deserves careful analytical treatment because it reveals something important about where the IRGC's operational logic has arrived after 10 nights of absorbing the most sustained American strike campaign in a generation. The IRGC's threat calculus throughout this confrontation has been built around the concept of imposing cost on entities whose pain could translate into political pressure on the American administration to de-escalate. Cost on Gulf state governments hosting American forces. Cost on commercial shipping transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Cost on the global economy through oil supply disruption. And now, apparently, cost on American commercial technology infrastructure in the region. This is not a military target in any meaningful operational sense. Amazon's data center infrastructure in Bahrain does not contribute to American military strike capability in the Iranian theater. It does not support CENTCOM's targeting architecture. It does not provide intelligence to the F-35s hitting missile sites across Iran. It provides cloud computing services to commercial entities and government customers in the region. Targeting it is the operational choice of a military organization that has concluded that inflicting visible economic and commercial disruption on American interests in the region can substitute for the kind of military success it is no longer achieving against actual American military targets. This is the strategic migration that analysts watch for in adversary behavior when direct military confrontation is producing consistently unfavorable outcomes. The adversary shifts from military targets to economic targets, from military logic to terrorism logic, because the military exchange is not going the direction the original plan anticipated. The IRGC started this phase of the conflict attacking military shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. It escalated to attacking civilian commercial vessels on UN-designated safe routes. It escalated again to attacking American service members in Jordan. And now it is targeting commercial data center infrastructure and claiming credit for the attack, regardless of whether the strike achieved the stated objective. The trajectory of these target selections is not a sign of an institution with an expanding range of options. It is a sign of an institution working through a diminishing list of things it can threaten that still produce the political effect it is trying to generate. Now, let's talk about the names that need to be said before anything else in this analysis, because the strategic picture exists within a human context that demands acknowledgement before the operational analysis proceeds. First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan, 25 years old, from Iwa Beach, Hawaii. Private Isabella Gonzalez, 19 years old, from Carrollton, Texas. These are the names the United States Army released for the 2 service members killed in the Iranian ballistic missile attack on the base in Jordan. They are the 15th and 16th Americans killed in this war. 25 years old and 19 years old, a lieutenant and a private, an officer and an enlisted soldier who went to the same base, absorbed the same Iranian ballistic missile attack, and paid the same price for the same confrontation with an institution that decided their deaths were an acceptable operational outcome. First Lieutenant Feehan and Private Gonzalez are the human dimension of every abstract phrase in this conflict about American casualties, and IRGC targeting decisions and the cost of military confrontation. Every subsequent operational analysis of the 10th night of strikes, every assessment of the IRGC's diminishing military capacity, every discussion of the ceasefire proposals being floated through Qatar and Egypt and Pakistan exists in the context of what it cost to get to this point in the campaign. The service members still in theater, still executing the mission, doing so in the honor of their fallen colleagues and in defense of the objective that brought all of them to Jordan in the first place. Now, let's talk about what the 10th night accomplished operationally and what the IRGC's response to it reveals about where this confrontation actually stands beneath the rhetorical surface. The F-35 is the platform that deserves the most analytical attention in the current operational cycle, because its role in the 10th Night's strike package goes beyond the conventional precision strike mission that most coverage attributes to it. The F-35's sensor architecture gives it an ISR capability that makes it simultaneously a strike platform and an intelligence collection node operating in the same airspace during the same sortie. The aircraft's sensor fusion system provides the pilot with a comprehensive situational awareness picture that integrates radar data, infrared imagery, and electronic warfare information into a single coherent display. This capability transforms the F-35 from a single-role weapon deliverer into a networked intelligence platform that can identify, classify, and target Iranian military assets while simultaneously providing that targeting data to other platforms in the strike package through the same communication network that connects the entire coalition force structure. The F-35's ability to operate in defended airspace that would present unacceptable risk to less stealthy platforms means that it can conduct close-range reconnaissance of Iranian military facilities, including the hardened underground bunkers where the IRGC has been trying to conceal its ballistic missile and drone inventory at the moment when the intelligence derived from that reconnaissance is most operationally relevant. An ISR platform operating from safe altitude provides targeting data that reflects where the IRGC's mobile assets were when the collection occurred. An F-35 operating in Iranian airspace with a radar cross-section that the IRGC's surviving and degraded air defense network cannot reliably detect provides targeting data that reflects where those assets are now at the moment the strike decision is being made. This is why the 10th Night strike package was specifically focused on crushing ballistic missile and drone inventory inside deep mountain bunkers. The imagery coming out of this phase of the campaign shows the IRGC's concealment architecture with a specificity that reflects close-range collection. Hundreds of bunkers built into mountain terrain across Iran, dispersed storage sites established specifically to complicate the targeting problem for an adversary trying to locate and destroy the inventory before it can be launched. The dispersal strategy was built on sound military logic. Concentration makes targeting easier for the adversary. Distribution makes targeting harder. If the IRGC can spread its ballistic missiles and drones across hundreds of separate hardened locations, rather than concentrating them in a small number of large facilities, destroying the inventory requires finding and striking hundreds of individual targets rather than a manageable number of primary storage nodes. The F-35, paired with the F-16CJ Wild Weasel in the current strike architecture, is the answer to the dispersal problem. The F-35 provides the close-range ISR that identifies which specific bunkers in the distributed network contain active inventory, rather than empty, hardened structures used as decoys to consume American ordnance on target sets with no military value. The F-16CJ Wild Weasel, with its AGM-88 HARM missiles, addresses the surface-to-air missile systems the IRGC is using to protect its dispersed ballistic missile sites from exactly the kind of close-range reconnaissance and strike that the F-35 is conducting. The Wild Weasels harm homes on radar emissions, creating the same impossible choice for every Iranian air defense operator in the package. Activate the radar and die, or keep it off and go blind. At the moment, the strike package needs to be tracked most. When the F-16CJ has cleared the radar network in a given area, the F-35 can conduct its close-range reconnaissance and strike missions with the freedom of action that the Wild Weasel's suppression of the air defense layer has created. The F-18 Super Hornets now launching air-launched cruise missiles add a standoff strike capability that addresses the specific tactical problem the IRGC has been constructing around its dispersed missile sites. If the IRGC is protecting its ballistic missile storage bunkers with surface-to-air missile systems, a strike aircraft that must enter the surface-to-air missile engagement envelope to target the bunkers faces risk that grows with every surviving surface-to-air missile battery in the area of operations. An air-launched cruise missile released from dozens of miles outside the surface-to-air missile engagement envelope reaches the target without exposing the delivering aircraft to the engagement zone entirely. The F-18 releases the cruise missile from standoff range. The missile navigates autonomously to the designated coordinates. The surface-to-air missile battery defending the target site can engage the incoming cruise missile, but engaging an inbound cruise missile consumes its own interceptor inventory in the same way that ballistic missile intercepts consume the IRGC's launch inventory. Every surface-to-air missile battery that fires at an American cruise missile is a battery whose interceptor supply is being depleted. At the same time, the strike campaign is depleting the offensive inventory those batteries are trying to protect. The Aegis combat system on the naval surface combatants executing the blockade in the Arabian Sea is the connective tissue that makes all of these platforms operationally coherent as a networked system rather than a collection of independent strike assets. The Aegis system's ability to share tracking data across the entire surface combatant force and to transmit that data upward to the airborne strike platforms operating over Iranian airspace means that the targeting picture available to an F-35 pilot making a strike decision over a hardened Iranian bunker reflects not just the pilot's own sensor inputs, but the aggregated intelligence from the entire networked force, including space-based assets, MQ-9 Reaper persistent coverage, and Aegis radar tracking data from surface combatants hundreds of miles away. This is what 10 nights of precision strikes by an integrated networked force look like from the operational architecture level. Not 10 individual nights of unconnected strike packages. 10 nights of a learning system that gets better at finding the IRGC's dispersed inventory, more efficient at clearing the air defense obstacles between the strike platform and the target, and more precise at distinguishing active concealment sites from empty decoy positions with each successive operational cycle. The IRGC has been playing against a system that improves while it degrades. That asymmetry has been compounding for 10 consecutive nights. Now let's talk about what the IRGC actually has left, because the honest assessment of its remaining capability is essential to understanding why the ceasefire begging operation running through Qatar, Egypt, and Pakistan is happening right now, and why the timing of that operation tells you more about the IRGC's strategic situation than any of its public statements about radar clearing operations and Amazon data centers. The IRGC is not disarmed. Reports suggest it still has approximately 2,000 ballistic missiles in its surviving inventory. It demonstrated on the 10th night that it can still generate a multi-front missile and drone campaign hitting multiple locations across the region simultaneously. Its mobile transporter erector launchers that have not yet been located and struck by the ISR architecture remain operational. The Shahed drone production capacity, whatever portion of it has survived the strikes on production infrastructure, can still generate new platforms at some rate below the pre-conflict level. The IRGC has been graded by the campaign, but it has not been disarmed. But the inventory picture needs to be read against the consumption rate and the resupply reality, rather than as a static snapshot of remaining capability. 2,000 ballistic missiles sounds significant until you calculate how many have been fired across 10 nights of retaliatory launches at Gulf partner bases, how many have been destroyed in hardened underground storage facilities by 5,000-pound penetrating munitions. In the Desfil-class strikes, how many have been destroyed in the surface-level dispersal sites that the F-35 ISR has been locating, and the Wild Weasels and Strike Eagles have been prosecuting, and how many cannot be replenished through supply lines that have been severed. The rail corridor to Russian and Chinese resupply through Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan is down. The The Chabahar port is degraded. The naval blockade covers Iranian maritime access. The financial lifeline of oil revenue has been frozen by the revocation of the general license. The IRGC is firing from a diminishing inventory against hardened targets protected by active intercept systems, with no resupply mechanism that can replace what is being consumed faster than it is being depleted. This is the arithmetic that is producing the ceasefire begging operation. Iran is requesting that Qatar, Egypt, and Pakistan submit a ceasefire proposal on its behalf. The diplomatic framing, making it appear as if the ceasefire initiative is coming from the mediating countries rather than from Tehran, is itself the most revealing detail about the regime's internal political constraints. The IRGC's hardline shadow commanders in the Strait of Hormuz, the ones whose institutional power depends on continued conflict, cannot be seen to be asking for a ceasefire. The political leadership in Tehran, whatever remains of it after months of invisible supreme leadership and contested succession, cannot publicly ask for a ceasefire without the hardline faction publicly calling it treason, which is exactly what happened when the previous Memorandum of Understanding was signed. The only path to a ceasefire that does not immediately produce an internal political rupture within the Iranian regime is a ceasefire that appears to have been proposed by external parties and presented to Iran as a third-party initiative that the regime can accept without having publicly requested it. This is what the Qatar, Egypt, Pakistan backchannel represents. Not a genuine diplomatic initiative from those countries reflecting their independent assessment of what a ceasefire serves their interests. A managed diplomatic performance designed to give the Iranian regime the political cover to accept an off-ramp it is asking for, but cannot be seen to have asked for. And the proposed ceasefire terms include a provision that would allow ships to freely flow through the Strait of Hormuz on the southern and central routes. This is the same provision that the Memorandum of Understanding included before the IRGC violated it by attacking commercial vessels on the UN-designated southern corridor. The same provision that the IRGC's shadow generals and coastal admirals refused to honor in practice, regardless of what the political layer agreed to in writing. If the ceasefire being proposed through Qatar and Egypt includes a Hormuz free transit provision, the hardline commanders who control the C-802 launch positions along the Iranian coastline and the fast attack boat operations in the strait are the same commanders who will decide independently of whatever Tehran signs whether that provision is honored in the operational environment of the waterway they physically control. This is the ceasefire trap that the American administration is now facing, and understanding it requires understanding the specific lesson that the preceding months of this conflict have already demonstrated at significant cost. The IRGC's political layer and its operational layer are not operating under unified command. When the political layer signs a ceasefire, the operational layer in the Strait reviews the terms against its own institutional interests and decides independently whether compliance serves those interests. This is not hypothetical. It is what happened with the Memorandum of Understanding. It is what produced the cruise missile strikes on the Mombasa and the Al-Baya on a UN-designated safe route. It is what produced the ballistic missile attack in Jordan that killed First Lieutenant Fian and Private Gonzalez. Every previous ceasefire and negotiated framework in this conflict has failed not because the Tehran political layer did not nominally agree to the terms, but because the operational layer in the Strait did not honor the terms that the political layer agreed to. The ceasefire being requested through Qatar and Egypt would produce the same outcome if the American administration accepts it on the same terms as the previous frameworks, a signed agreement. A period of nominal compliance long enough for the hardline commanders to assess that their inventory has been partially reconstituted and their operational options have partially recovered. And then, a return to the same pattern of commercial vessel attacks, public threats, and diplomatic gaslighting that produced the current 10-night strike campaign. The honest strategic assessment of this moment requires confronting the specific question that the IRGC's ceasefire request has put on the table. Is this an adversary offering genuine compliance in exchange for an off-ramp? Or is this an adversary trying to use the same ceasefire mechanism it has used before to buy time for reconstitution before the next cycle of the same conflict? The Tabriz Air Base incident is the most recent and most operationally precise answer to that question. The IRGC flexed its underground drone network at Tabriz, essentially showing the world what it had hidden there, and then CENTCOM immediately struck Tabriz and destroyed what the IRGC had just revealed. The IRGC's operational security has degraded to the point where displaying capability to project strength immediately produces a targeting solution for the campaign that is degrading that capability. An institution that cannot maintain operational security about its own remaining assets is an institution whose command and communication infrastructure has been sufficiently disrupted by 10 nights of communications infrastructure strikes that its ability to coordinate intelligence about what to show and what to hide has broken down. The claim to be running a SEAD operation, suppression of enemy air defenses, using ballistic missiles against American radar sites, is the analytical detail that reveals the IRGC's information warfare posture most clearly. A military force conducting a genuine CED campaign does not announce it publicly in advance. Tactical surprise is the foundational premise of suppression of enemy air defenses. You do not tell your adversary that you are going to target their radar sites before you attempt to do so, because the adversary will move the mobile systems and harden the fixed ones and redistribute its air defense assets in response to the announced targeting intent. The IRGC announcing its SED operation publicly is not a SEED operation. It is an information operation designed to give the appearance of military coherence and offensive capability to an audience that might otherwise conclude, correctly, that what is actually happening is a desperate missile campaign against hardened American positions with intercept rates that make the operational return on each launch negligible. There is also a gap in the IRGC's claimed CAD doctrine that reveals the fundamental limitation of using ballistic missiles for this mission category. Surface-to-air missile systems and radar installations are mobile. They move. The targeting solution that was accurate when the IRGC's intelligence identified a radar position is potentially outdated by the time the ballistic missile arrives at the designated coordinates, because the radar has moved in the interval between intelligence collection and strike execution. CAD, with precision-guided munitions delivered by manned aircraft using real-time sensor updates, works because the aircraft can adjust its targeting in response to target movement detected during the approach. A ballistic missile flying a predetermined trajectory to a fixed coordinate cannot adjust for target movement after launch. The IRGC's announced radar clearing operation is not SED. It is ballistic missile fire on coordinates that may or may not contain the mobile targets that the IRGC believes it is engaging, with no ability to verify the strike result in real time or adjust the targeting based on what the missile actually finds at the designated coordinates. CENTCOM's response to this claimed SED operation was the same response it has been providing for 10 consecutive nights. F-35s and F-16s prosecuting Iranian command centers, maritime capabilities, missile and drone sites, and air defense systems. The IRGC announces radar clearing. CENTCOM provides the longest receipt of Iranian radars the IRGC has ever seen. The information gap between what the IRGC claims to be accomplishing and what CENTCOM is documenting it has accomplished is the same information gap that has been widening for 10 consecutive nights. And the IRGC's decision to claim an Amazon data center strike rather than an actual military achievement suggests that the gap between what it claims and what it can actually verify has reached a point where the institution is generating claims designed to impress audiences rather than reports designed to reflect operational reality. The Anduril Thunder system that has just been released, the autonomous vertical takeoff and landing drone that can be commanded by an Apache helicopter pilot, acting as an airborne mission commander, while the autonomous drones prosecute target sets independently, represents the next phase of the technology trajectory that has been defining the operational environment in this and every other contemporary conflict. The concept of a single crewed helicopter controlling a swarm of autonomous armed drones, each capable of independently navigating to a designated target, engaging it with precision, and returning or continuing to the next assigned target while the human commander in the Apache maintains situational awareness and mission direction over the entire swarm, is the force multiplication concept that reshapes the math of every future air-to-ground engagement. An Apache crew that can put 30 drone sorties worth of strike capacity into the target area from a single aircraft platform changes what a given number of human pilots and helicopters can accomplish against a dispersed adversary force. The IRGC built its dispersal strategy for its ballistic missile and drone inventory against a targeting architecture that required a human crew for each strike. The Thunder and systems like it are building toward a targeting architecture, where one human crew controls many simultaneous strikes against many dispersed targets in the same operational window. The dispersal strategy that made the IRGC's inventory harder to find and destroy with legacy strike architectures does not scale the same way against swarm architectures that can address many dispersed nodes simultaneously. Ukraine's role as the operational test environment for exactly these kinds of autonomous drone systems is the detail that connects the broader technology trajectory to the specific military innovations being deployed and validated in the Iran confrontation. Ukraine has been operating at the leading edge of drone adaptation throughout its war, producing systems with capabilities that were theoretical before they were battlefield validated. A drone that can drive onto a beach on a boat hull, deploy a .50 caliber weapon system, and engage positions on the beach from an autonomous ground platform is the kind of capability that moves from science fiction to operational reality through exactly the kind of iterative development under combat conditions that the Ukrainian theater has been enabling. The military technology being deployed against the IRGC's military infrastructure is being refined in real time by the operational experience of the conflict itself, and that refinement consistently moves in the direction of more autonomous systems, more networked coordination, more standoff capability, and more persistent surveillance, all of which reduce the IRGC's ability to hide, move, and protect what remains of its military capacity. The 40 chess strategic picture as it stands after 10 consecutive nights of American strikes, and the IRGC's decision to route its ceasefire request through Qatar, Egypt, and Pakistan, resolves to a specific fork in the road, with a 72-hour decision window attached to it. Option 1 is the off-ramp. Accept the ceasefire proposal being submitted by the mediating countries, impose conditions on Iranian compliance, and test whether the political layer in Tehran has sufficient authority over the shadow commanders in the Strait to produce operational compliance with those conditions, this time when it did not produce it last time. The risk of this option is documented and specific. The IRGC has used the ceasefire mechanism to buy reconstitution time in every previous iteration of this conflict. Accepting another ceasefire without a fundamentally different enforcement mechanism produces a fundamentally similar outcome to the previous ceasefire, which produced the tanker attacks that produced the current 10-night strike campaign. The ceasefire proposal reportedly includes a free transit provision for the Hormuz southern and central routes. If the shadow commanders who physically control those routes refuse to honor that provision, as their counterparts did with the previous memorandum's equivalent provision, the cycle restarts with the IRGC's inventory partially reconstituted. Option 2 is continued pressure, no ceasefire. Night 11 follows night 10. The strike campaign continues at its current tempo or expands to additional target categories. The IRGC's ballistic missile inventory continues to deplete through a combination of launches against intercepting air defense systems and destruction of stored inventory in hardened facilities by penetrating munitions. The political pressure on the regime's internal structure continues to compound. The visible gap between the IRGC's public claims and its operational reality continues to widen. And at some point, the depletion of inventory and the degradation of command coherence reaches a threshold at which the institution's ability to function as a credible military force in the Strait collapses in ways that no ceasefire can temporarily paper over. The specific analytical point that distinguishes these two options from a strategic perspective is the question of whether the Iranian political layer that is requesting the ceasefire has the actual institutional authority to deliver operational compliance from the military layer that controls the Strait. The Memorandum of Understanding demonstrated that it does not. The IRGC's hardline clerics calling the MOU treason demonstrated that it does not. The Iranian state television cutting speaker Golubov's broadcast mid-sentence demonstrated that the institution is not operating under unified command authority. If the ceasefire being requested through Qatar and Egypt is signed by the same political layer, whose previous ceasefire commitment was violated by the same operational commanders, who control the same coastal positions, that fired the same weapons, that produced the same kind of attacks that triggered the current strike campaign, the analytical conclusion about its durability is not uncertain. The IRGC's public posture claims radar clearing operations and Amazon data center destruction. Its back-channel posture is begging Qatar and Egypt to get it a ceasefire before the 10th night becomes the 15th, and the 20th, and the 25th. The gap between those two postures is the most accurate available measure of the institution's actual strategic situation. And the names First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan and Private Isabella Gonzalez, 25 and 19 years old, are the most important measure of what it has cost to reach the moment where the institution responsible for their deaths is routing ceasefire requests through foreign intermediaries because it cannot publicly ask for the off-ramp it desperately needs. 10 consecutive nights, 900 vessels through the Strait, 450 million barrels of crude oil flowing through a waterway the IRGC declared closed, and an institution that went to war with Amazon while simultaneously begging Pakistan to get it out of the war it started with the United States military. The next 72 hours will answer whether the off-ramp gets taken or whether Night 11 follows Night 10 with the same precision and the same lethality that has defined this campaign from its first moment to its most recent. The fork in the road is real. The decision belongs to Washington. And the names of 2 Americans who are not coming home from Jordan are the weight on the scales of that decision that no diplomatic framing and no ceasefire proposal routed through sympathetic intermediaries can remove from the calculation. First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan, Private Isabella Gonzalez. They will not be forgotten. And whatever decision the next 72 hours produces, it will be made in the context of what their service cost and what the institution responsible for their deaths has demonstrated it is willing to do when given the opportunity to rebuild and restart.